Rumble in the South China Sea. Chinese Coast Guard ships block Philippine vessels, firing water cannons and causing damage. The rich get richer. The rift between Taiwan's wealthy and poor has quadrupled in 30 years. Extreme heat forces schools to shutter across South and Southeast Asia. Plus, an alligator brushing its teeth? That's just a bunch of hot air. One Taiwanese teenager blows up at a balloon twisting competition in the US. A very warm welcome to Taiwan Plus News. I'm Leslie Liao. The Philippines has accused China of damaging one of its boats in the disputed Scarborough Shoal. That's after the Chinese Coast Guard fired water cannons at Philippine ships resupplying fishers there. Rick Glauert reports from the South China Sea.
Tensions between Beijing and Manila are simmering here in the South China Sea. That's after the Philippines has accused the China Coast Guard of blasting its ships with a water cannon on the Scarborough Shoal. That's a rich fishing ground here in the South China Sea, claimed by both countries, but in recent years it's been occupied by China. China says that it's expelled Philippine fishing vessels from that area, whilst Philippines says that it stood its ground. China and the Philippines and its allies vie for power in these contested waters of the South China Sea. We've been seeing that firsthand. We're on board a Philippine Navy patrol vessel taking part in Balikatan exercises with the US. A Chinese Navy vessel here recently encroached on a live fire target practice, causing that exercise to be halted. In light of this recent news, the officers here on the Navy patrol vessel will likely be keeping an even keener eye on the Chinese vessels that have been shadowing these drills. Alex Chen and Rick Glauert in the South China Sea for Taiwan Plus.
The latest data shows that Taiwan's wealth gap has grown sharply over the past 30 years. The government says the wealthiest people hold far more assets than the poorest. John Van Triest helps crunch the numbers and explain why.
For 55-year-old single mother Ms. Zhu, the fact that average household wealth in Taiwan is around $500,000 doesn't mean much. She's among the 71% of families that fall below this average. Some days, her sweet potato stand struggles to pull in even $30.
因为现在的利润不到一半，下雨天也不能卖，然后天气热，你看像天气这么热，没生意啊。
Not all those who fall below the average are in quite such tough circumstances. But wealth inequality is a fact of Taiwanese society. And new government data shows it's grown greatly in recent decades. One way to see this is to compare the earnings gap between the richest 20% and the poorest 20% of society. In 1991, the richest made around 17 times more than the poorest. But by the end of 2021, that was up to 67 times more. Researchers say a person's occupation and economic trends factor into who rises in the wealth ratings and who falls behind.
During the pandemic in 2021, remote work opportunities boosted exports of electronic components and the manufacture and export of ICT equipment. But the service and other traditional industries focused on domestic demand performed very poorly. This is reflected in the growing income gap between workers in different sectors.
There are countries where the situation's worse. One way to see this is to look at what's known as the Jeepney coefficient, a number between 0 and 1 used to show how unequal a society is. 0 means perfect equality, while 1 means total inequality. With a 2021 score of 0.606, Taiwan is more equal than the UK, France, or Japan, to name a few examples. But back in 1991, Taiwan had a much lower score of 0.47. Taiwan's net and gross national wealth has risen even through the end of the pandemic. But there are still plenty of people in Taiwan, people like sweet potato vendor Ms. Zhu, who aren't benefiting from the country's overall prosperity. Eason Chen and John Van Triest for Taiwan Plus.
To learn more about the wealth gap in Taiwan and how it relates to inequality elsewhere, John Van Triest spoke to fair wage advocate Roy Ng.
So what would you say are the root causes of wealth inequality in Taiwan, and are they largely the same as you'll find in other countries?
I think the key to the huge wealth inequality in Taiwan is due to the massive profit accumulation among businesses in Taiwan, especially in the manufacturing and wholesale and retail trade sectors. The other issue is that executives in Taiwan's businesses do tend to pay themselves higher pay increases than the general workers. And in the interest of raising profits in these companies, they do tend to also suppress wages.
How do you account for that? And again, is this a Taiwan problem or more of a global one?
I think in part it is due to the way the neoliberal capitalistic economy has been structured and how production has resulted in some countries being manufacturing countries and therefore dampening their wages in order to produce low-cost manufacturing products to other countries. And Taiwan belongs to this set of countries where wages have been suppressed in order to remain competitive. The other issue is also a domestic issue where since the 1997 economic crisis, Taiwan has tended to take a much more conservative and pro-business approach in terms of suppressing wages. Minimum wage did not grow for a decade before it started growing, and even then it has not caught up to the rates that it was growing at prior to the 1997 economic crisis.
How much credence do you give to the figures that we're getting from the government in terms of people being honest about their wealth or maybe hiding it abroad somewhere?
I think the issue with this current report is that it can be a bit difficult trying to understand the methodology that the government has developed to measure household wealth inequality, especially since last year there was another report that provided data that was quite dissimilar from this current report. OECD and Eurostat, Europa data also has different figures, so it might require more understanding of the methodology that the government is using. There is also an uncertainty as to the kind of information that people are providing that can allow us to have a more accurate assessment of the actual wealth inequality in Taiwan.
Once again, that was John Van Trieste speaking to fair wage advocate Roy Nguyen about wealth inequality in Taiwan. Amazon Web Services is reportedly set to make its first major investment in Taiwan. According to industry insiders, the cloud computing giant is looking to spend some $90 million to set up data centers in Taiwan. The project will reportedly take place over multiple stages. AWS has been expanding its operations in Asia. An AWS investment here would follow ones by Google parent company Alphabet and Microsoft, both of which already have large-scale data centers in the country. Samsung is reporting a return to profit since its post-COVID downturn. The South Korean semiconductor and smartphone giant reported a tenfold increase in first quarter profits from $464 million last year to $4.8 billion this year. The company says strong smartphone sales and higher prices for semiconductors are driving the growth. They expect a robust second quarter as demand for generative AI products stays strong. A wave of exceptionally hot weather is gripping South and Southeast Asia. It's creating unbearable conditions for people across the region and has triggered health warnings. Rosie Greninger has more.
Residents in Mumbai on India's west coast flocked to the city's watersides to find some relief from a record-breaking heat wave plaguing South and Southeast Asia. The scorching temperatures exceeding 40 degrees Celsius have caused 2 heat stroke deaths in the country. And there have been 450 heat-related health incidents as people are forced outside to vote in the country's general elections.
इस गर्मी में हो चाहे कहीं भी हो, बरसात भी हो तो भी वोट डालने आना चाहिए.
In Tamil Nadu, in India's southernmost state, politicians are distributing water to aid voters. While at zoos across the country, keepers are doing what they can to try and keep animals cool, fanning them and providing icy treats. April and May are usually the hottest months in this region, but this year, temperatures have been worsened by climate change and the El Nino weather pattern that involves unusually warmer waters in the eastern Pacific. In
Health warnings have been issued as temperatures reach over 42 degrees.
But those who make a living outdoors are struggling to find a balance between shading from the sun and finding work.
এরকম টানা গরম দেখিনি কিন্তু বৃষ্টি হয়েছিল বাতাস হয়েছিল অনেক আরাম লাগছে এবার কাছে এক সপ্তাহ যে বৃষ্টিগুলো হইতেছে না বাতাস কোনোদিন হয় কোনোদিন হয় না মানুষের অনেক কষ্ট হয়েছে
Students in Bangladesh have now returned to learning after classrooms were closed for days due to the heat. But in the Philippines, schools are empty, shutting their doors after the heat index reached 50 degrees. The extreme heat is also affecting small businesses.
Malaki pong impact sa negosyo Napakalaki. Yung pong kita ho ninyo, walang bumibili. Walang bumibiling sinong bibili sa'yo kung wala namang mga estudyante? Bibili ng mga school supply.
In Thailand, 30 people have been killed by heat stroke this year. And authorities are warning residents to avoid outdoor activities as temperatures reach over 40 degrees. Last week, demand for electricity soared as people turned to air conditioning for relief. But for the disadvantaged in the country, it is not an option.
ถ้าที่มีแอร์ก็ใช้ไม่ได้แอร์ต้องใช้พัดลมละมันเปลืองค่าน้ำค่าไฟเขา
For years, scientists have been warning of the disastrous effects human activity, especially the burning of fossil fuels, is having on the climate. Now, climate activists are asking global leaders to see the extreme conditions people in South and Southeast Asia are grappling with as an urgent call to action. Dolphine Chen and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
The group of 7 nations have agreed to end their use of coal power for generation by 2035. Energy and environment ministers from France, the US, the UK, Germany, Japan, Italy, and Canada reached the deal in Turin, Italy on Monday. It's a significant step in the move away from fossil fuels, which cause climate change and pollution when burned. Activists protested outside the 2-day meeting, saying the bloc's members need to decarbonize their economies as soon as possible. A Taiwanese high school student has twisted his way into first place at an international creative balloon contest. Irene Lin reports.
From yellow balloons to a lively Pikachu, Taiwanese high schoolers Yan Ruijun's balloon animals really pop. His hands and lungs worked magic at the Colortech's Color Quest Balloon Animal Contest in the U.S. He snatched this year's top spot at the event with his inflated alligator creation, beating out close to 500 submissions from around the world. Yan has had high aspirations for his balloon animals since he was just 4 years old.
当时没什么玩具，就只有气球，然后第一次接触到气球，就很喜欢气球那个色泽还有触感。网络资源没有像现在那么发达，要找个教学影片很困难，所以我只能自己摸索。
Yan says he's inspired by children's books and cartoons, and it took hard work and passion to get this good at designing then modeling balloon animals. His alligator took him a week of planning and 18 hours to put together.
只要我一觉得说有哪个细节可以调整，我就会把它停下来，就会重做一个新的，重做3次，调整到最满意的状态。那之所以要不间断制作，是因为气球它的气体是会随着时间溢出来。
As a full-time student, Yan is keeping balloon modeling as a hobby for now. But as his social media following balloons, this fledgling star is floating on air. Justin Wu and Irene Lin for TaiwanPlus.
We're going to take a quick break, but still to come on TaiwanPlus News. The backbone Philippine transportation may be at the end of its road as the government looks to curb emissions.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
For the biggest stories in tech, business, and more, be sure to follow TaiwanPlus on social media.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Medical workers at a hospital in Jiayi City in the country's south have staged a walkout over stalled salary negotiations. Meetings between the union and the hospital have been dragging on for months as the two sides try to agree on fair pay. Tiffany Wong has more.
A lunchtime walkout. Over 100 medical personnel at this hospital in Jiayi City in southern Taiwan are demanding higher pay and a plan to hire more staff. The hospital union says that stagnant wages have caused an alarming number of staff to quit and warned this could seriously affect medical care.
开刀房已经有超过30几个的护理师离职了。如果乡亲们要来开刀，可能会一直排，甚至只有医生。
The protest comes after 10 rounds of negotiations over the last 6 months failed to meet the union's demand of a 6% salary increase, instead only resulting in a 1 to 2% raise.
其他医院的调的薪资都比这些还高，那我们觉得应该基本上要调到6%才足够。
They said they've seen the hospital invest in renovating its facilities, but not in its workers. But the hospital says that its pay and benefits are higher than the industry average, and that they have brought on new staff to replace those who have left.
会跟工会去讨论的。那我就是说，我先让大家知道，医院其实很照顾同仁啊。那我们的整个薪资福利也都是这个偏上。
Taiwan's medical sector has been facing growing dissatisfaction among workers, who point to issues like low salaries and long working hours. Now these workers in Jiayi want to make it clear that retaining skilled talent comes at a price. Howard Zhang and Tiffany Wong for TaiwanPlus.
At least 45 people have died in flash floods and a landslide in central Kenya. Over 185,000 people have been displaced after seasonal rains intensified by El Nino swept the region. Local officials initially said the flooding was due to a burst dam, but later said it was caused by a blocked river tunnel. Kenya's Red Cross is conducting rescue operations across the country. Help is on the way for Taiwan's coral populations. A team of volunteer divers is working to remove trash from the shores of Taiwan's southern tip just as the species' spawning season gets underway. Once again, John Van Trieste has more.
In the waters off Taiwan's southern tip, April and May is coral spawning season. These days, though, the reefs here are far from pristine.
藻类的鱼变少，比如说我们在海里现在看到莺歌鱼都变少了，可能过度的捕捞了啊，可能是污染啊，或之前的白化所造成的死亡或怎样，它的覆盖面积变少。当覆盖面变少，就藻类就会长上去了。
And there's trash. A lot of it. This year, a team of divers from across Taiwan has gathered to remove as much refuse as they can carry from among the spawning corals. They're focused on 5 sites.
这一次的进来，总共有来自全国北中南113位潜水好手，总共清出了30公斤的垃圾，其中以绳索、渔网、铁铝罐、塑胶等最多占了1半以上。
This is one of many regular beach cleanups held across Taiwan. But as the divers themselves note, the tide of undersea trash never ends. They say attitudes need to change if things are to get better.
都是保特瓶，或者吃完的奶茶啊，或者是他不经意掉下来的塑胶袋啊，最害怕碰到小 baby 的妈妈把她的 diaper 就往海边，那个最可怕，那粘在那个礁石上。
These divers say that while Taiwan's waters are rich in marine life, it's up to ordinary people to make sure they're protected. Delphine Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Solomon Islands Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare says he will not stand for renomination in a vote that could impact security in the Pacific. Sogavare severed ties with Taiwan in 2019, switching recognition to China. In 2022, his government signed a security pact with Beijing, drawing the Pacific island nation closer to China. The Solomon Islands plays a key role in the rivalry between Washington and Beijing. During the country's recent parliamentary elections, no single party won enough seats to form a government. With Sogavare bowing out of a bid for re-election, his party will now support Foreign Minister Jeremiah Manele for Prime Minister. A strike by jeepney drivers in the Philippines has entered its second day. The government wants to end the privately owned buses, which look like a cross between a Jeep and a van because of their pollution-belching ways. But their plan to clean up the roads and the air has left drivers fuming. Bryn Thomas reports.
Noisy, colorful, easy to fix, and cheap to ride. The iconic Jeepney is the backbone of transportation in the Philippines. But now, a government phase-out program could bring them and the auto shop's day support to the end of their road.
It was a heavy blow because we've had customers that have been around since the 50s, so they've been purchasing jeepneys, making their fleet bigger. However, with this new program, there have been a lot of doubts or fears that if they purchase a brand new jeepney, will they still be able to use it like a couple of years down the road?
70 years ago, Leonard Sarao's grandfather got into the jeepney business. At the time, the country was full of U.S. military jeeps left over from World War II, and industrious Filipinos converted their sturdy frames and reliable engines into something like public buses. For years, privately owned and operated jeepneys set up their own routes and were the go-to option for transportation in the country. Sarao's family has been involved in the industry the entire time.
Here in Sarao Motors, until today, ever since the 50s, we do everything by hand. So most of the fabrication works, most of the cutting, most of the welding, it's all done by hand.
The result is a uniquely Filipino transport solution, but one that belches exhaust. Trying to curtail emissions, the Philippine government has told jeepney operators they have to join a cooperative and then replace their fleet with modern, safer, cleaner running vehicles. And although the government is offering subsidies to ease the transition, newer jeepneys or other alternatives cost more than 4 times as much and are far harder to maintain. The simple diesel engines found in old-school jeepneys can be serviced easily by mechanics anywhere in the country with commonly available tools.
Modern, mahirap namin kunin yan eh. Napakahirap. Isa pa, hindi namin kaya ng presyong yan. Ang pag nasira yung modern, saan kami tatakbo? Wala naman kami pagkukunan ng ganyan pag nasira yan. Ang isa pa, dito sa aming samahan, maayos naman itong jeep. Magaganda naman, bakit nila kailangan i-phase out?
With these higher operating costs come higher fares, and many Filipino commuters are not happy to see such a key part of their daily lives fading away.
Bago pong magiging jeep aircon, hindi po kami sanay sa aircon na sasakyan. Mas okay po yung jeep, tas dire-diretso lang. Tas mas mura din po yung pamasahe.
With a phase-out set to start this week, the Philippine government is not likely to pump the brakes on its plans to replace this colorful icon. And that means jeepney operators are going to have to buckle up and prepare for a rough road ahead. Leon and Bryn Thomas for TaiwanPlus.
The world's biggest digital astronomy camera has been completed. Our reporter Sandy Chi gets ready to see into infinity and beyond.
Imagine a camera so powerful that it can clearly spot a golf ball from 24 kilometers away. That's possible for Legacy Survey of Space and Time camera, the world's biggest digital astronomy camera. It's been put together at the SLAC National Accelerator Laboratory in California. The camera will be shipped to its permanent home, the Vera Rubin Observatory in Chile, in May.
So this camera has to get from California down to Chile and up a mountaintop. Turns out that's actually a pretty delicate process. This thing it's not particularly fragile. It's designed to survive earthquakes on the top of a Chilean mountaintop, but it is something that we want to take care of on the shipment, and it comes with a lot of support hardware.
The camera is massive, weighing some 3 tons. It has a resolution of 3.2 billion pixels and is the largest digital camera ever built for astronomy. Once installed, it will be able to take about 1,000 pictures every night, gathering up to 20 terabytes of data. Over the next 10 years, the camera will observe the southern hemisphere sky every night. Each of the images it captures will cover a surface equivalent to 40 times that of the moon.
taking that many pictures, in addition to having them being of more of the sky, in addition to having them being able to see really far, is just a really powerful combination of being able to collect a lot of data. And I like to think of it as if you're looking for a needle in a haystack, which is essentially what you're doing when you're trying to find something cool in space, the more haystacks you have, the more likely you are to find some needles.
With all these images, scientists are hoping to peer deeper into some of the mysteries in the universe, including dark matter and dark energy. They also plan to zoom in on smaller objects in the solar system to gain a better understanding of how it was formed. The camera may also have a role in identifying incoming threats from asteroids. After working on the project for nearly 20 years, many of the people involved are eager to see what the new camera discovers.
It's really bizarre. So for the engineers like myself, it feels like we're tying a bow on it, sending it out the door. It feels like it's coming to a close, but in reality, it's just this cool transition to kind of handing it over to the operations team and the scientists, because for them, it's like they're itching to get all this data. So it's this transitional phase, and it's just really exciting to be a part of it.
The camera is scheduled to be installed at the Vera Rubin Observatory in May, with its first images released to the public in 2025. Justin Wu and Sani Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Now, thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Before we go, take a look at this white-tailed eagle, Europe's largest eagle species. They died out in France 130 years ago, but are now being reintroduced to the country. I'm Leslie Liao. Take care and see you next time.